Nothing makes me shake my head more than when I read Python threads on the forums. What is Python for? It sucks for combat. Why does the ship even exist? In reality, Python is extremely combat capable ship. Its main strength comes from being able to equip very high level modules such as 7A power plant and 7A power distributor, an exact same hull reinforcement slots that the Federal Corvette has, making Python quite a tough nut to crack once the shields drop. But with correct shields and shield boosters, to do even that is quite a challenge. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and talk about Python's hardpoints first. Now this build in particular is a mix between PvE and PvP. I use it almost specifically for bounty hunting in resource extraction sites, or farming merits around navigation beacons and anarchy systems. Using this loadout ensures that I can easily dispatch of any NPC within seconds, even if the NPCs are elite anacondas. As you can see, two large overcharged multi-cannons with incendiary round munitions melt shields pretty quickly, and one large overcharged multi-cannon with corrosive munitions rips apart the hull nicely, especially if you are sniping at power plants. Now, this trio in itself is perfect for PvE, and it's about as much firepower as you could possibly need to deal with any NPC ship currently in the game. However, on their own, these weapons could be considered below average for PvP, since everyone is running resistant shields these days. Multi-cannon builds tend to fall flat on their faces. However, against commanders in smaller ships like FDLs, Vultures, Diamondbacks, etc., these will do just fine. And against large ships like Anacondas, Corvettes, and Cutters, we have an ace up our sleeves. These bad boys right here are the reverberating cascade torpedo pylons. Now, since they have very limited ammunition, you won't be using them against NPCs, but when commanders get too close, it only takes a singular strike from these things to clarify their mortality.
Warning, thermal attack, gaining heat. Under attack. Warning, taking heat damage. Warning, shield breach attack.
Hold it right there. Did you see how fast that power plant popped? I tell commanders again and again, if you have a large ship, never, ever, ever fly it with an overcharged power plant, unless you are running very specific Imperial cutter builds. I did not kill this commander. In 3 years of playing this game, I actually never killed a commander, except for SDC scumbags, whom do not count. For me, personally, there is no moral gain from pulling the trigger. Even if it was agreed to be a lethal duel, I get more enjoyment from going out of my way to disable the opponent's ship rather than destroy it. But I've lost counts of the times I could have sent corvettes to the rebuy screen in this exact same scenario. The problem is the overrated love for prismatic shields. If you are a big ship captain, going from Python and up, the rule of thumb is fit an armored power plant first, and only if you have power to spare, then fit prismatic shields. Personally, on my corvettes both one-on-one and wing support builds, I use biweave shields. They are great when combined with resistance augmented boosters and have a fantastic synergy with B-level SCBs. I will showcase my corvette builds in the future video, but for now, let's go back to the Python and move to utility slots. Okay, so for the first 2 slots on the Python, I like to run 2 heatsink launchers. Since Python has a 7A power plant, even engineered as armored one, there's plenty of power to spare, allowing the Python to run prismatic shields and 2 shield cell banks at once. Now this is a key factor as it allows for a few interesting variations. First variation, which I have in this build, is running 2 heatsink launchers and 2 B-level shield cell banks. General rule of thumb for heatsinks is run enough for your shield cell banks to operate without burning your ship. However, 2 sets of B-level shield cell banks have a total of 12 charges, but as you can see here, we are carrying only 6 charges of heatsinks? Explanation is rather simple. There is an old ace trick with heatsinks that allows you to use 2 shield cell banks at once and only expend 1 heatsink to prevent overheating. I will be showcasing this trick in my upcoming PvP bootcamp videos. Now you might also be thinking why B-level shield cell banks aren't A ones better? Well, yes they are, but you can carry more B charges, making them give you significantly larger megajoule total. That being said, if you are encountering loads of reverberating cascade torpedo builds in PvP, a better build would be to run 1 capacity upgraded heatsink with 4 charges and 2 A-level shield cell banks, which would give you less megajoules since it only has 10 charges, but you would be able to use 8 of them with just 1 heatsink launcher. And for the last 2 shield cell bank charges, let your ship burn a little. Which is a calculated risk actually, since you won't take that much damage, and honestly, if you need the last charges in the first place, the fight is nearly over anyway. And running 1 heatsink launcher instead of 2 will free up a valuable slot that you can use for another shield booster or chaff, but personally, after this video goes live, I will be filling the slot with an electronic countermeasure system, wink wink. For the remaining 2 slots, the bulk standard these days, 2 resistance augmented boosters. Why resistance instead of heavy duty? I will be explaining that in a future PvP bootcamp video, but short version for now, resistance is better than overall strength, simple as that. Moving on to the core internals. Now, I honestly think that instead of constantly messing with the weapons, Frontier development should make a priority to actually rework the core internals. I quite literally have the exact same loadout for all the PvP and PvE ships that I have. No, literally, the exact same one. Only 2 things that vary. The bulkheads, depending on the meta, you run either reactive composites versus multi-cannon builds, and mirrored surface versus phasing sequence laser builds. And the power plant, armored if you're using a Python, Anaconda corvette, etc. Overcharged if you're running Vulture, Fer-de-Lance, Imperial cutter, etc. Everything else, thrusters, dirty drives hands down are the best unless you are crazy and still think that silent running builds work. Frameshift drive, increased range because of course. Life support, I prefer A rank because it allows to run life support off builds to save power. Power distributor, definitely charge enhanced, as it allows for an insane pips management in PvP, giving you a significant edge over your opponents. And D-grade sensors to say wait for now, but A-grade sensors after the next quote-unquote balance update. literally the same on every ship. Moving on to optional internals. For the shields, as I've mentioned before, Python usually has enough power to run prismatics, after already equipping the armored power plant. The best mod for shields right now is thermal resistance. I will be explaining why more thoroughly in an upcoming PvP bootcamp video, but long story short, 60% increase versus thermal is insane and gives huge advantages against both incendiary multi-cannons and laser builds. Shields are inherently good versus projectiles, but suck versus lasers and incendiary rounds. Modding your shields for thermal resistance and pairing them up with resistance augmented boosters gives you a mind-shattering 60% resistance against all attacks. Well, it's not quite straightforward and the formula is complicated, but that statement is close enough. And results are impressive. Take a look at this.
Warning, shield breach attack.
That was nearly a minute and a half of sustained damage from a fully upgraded Federal Corvette firing her weapons in anger. And with the shield cell banks on board, I could have easily charged back to full at least 5 times. Not to mention the fact that during live dogfighting, enemy wouldn't always have the angle of attack. So yeah, pretty darn impressive for a medium-sized ship. The rest of the internals are pretty straightforward. We already discussed the shield cell bank variations. Mine are currently unmodded due to real life plus making YouTube videos keeping me busy. I haven't yet had the chance, but when I will mod mine for rapid fire. The rest of the slots are packed with heavy duty hull reinforcements. Most notably, Python has 2 grade 5 slots, allowing the ship to be quite the rock once shields are down. Apart from that, the 2 key factors to note is that the ship has the cruise speed of 324 meters per second, making it faster than any of the large ships and actually being on par with Vulture and Fer-de-Lance, which is impressive for such an armored and well-armed ship. On top of that, it can boost up to 423 meters per second, wildly surpassing Federal Corvette and Anaconda, but mildly slower than Imperial Cutter. Mine boosts up to 450 meters per second. Talking about speed, an important thing to mention is that Python's Achilles heel is turning. Few patches ago, it was nerfed in a particular way. It loses full turning potential when moving at full speed, more than any other ship in the game. So if you are turn fighting, you will have to stay in the blue zone of the speed meter. And last but not least, Python's Supreme 7A power distributor allows for practically any weapon variation without ever overheating, making Python one of the most coolest running ships in the entire game alongside with the Corvette. So, a ship that has endurance of a large ship, speed of a medium ship, and firepower on the higher side of somewhere in the middle makes it very hard to argue with people who claim that Python truly is one of the best ships in the game.